Around 20 years ago, my grandmother Olga sat down at her computer and wrote her story. Thinking that the computer was a typewriter, every day she wrote, she printed, with no page numbers. So by the end, she had a massive pile of paper all stacked up and put into a box. Last year, my mom Erika had it put in order and translated from Hungarian to English. Since my grandmother passed away in 2017, we didn't have the opportunity to have her record her story. So I have. I will also be weaving a parallel journey of my grandmother's life with my mom's life and mine, as we travel into the past, learn about my grandmother, and learn about ourselves at the same time. The journey continues. Olga, Erika, and me. Part 5. Home. We arrived in Budapest on June 24th, 1945. Every train was met by young Jews who came to see who came back. I asked them if anyone from my family had returned. They said unfortunately not, and I felt as if the ground had opened beneath my feet. They told us to go to the offices of the JDC, or Joint, which is a Jewish relief organization, and give our names. There were a lot of people there already, and we had to wait. I sat down at the end of a long bench. I didn't care about anything anymore. Why did I come back? Why didn't I listen to the news on the loudspeakers when we arrived in Neuruppin? All day long, they were broadcasting the news about what the Germans had done to the Jews of Europe in the concentration camps, how they had murdered millions in the gas chambers. I heard it, but I didn't want to accept it. I only had one thought: to get home as fast as I could. I was still hoping to find my loved ones alive. And here I am, back in Budapest, and I am still hoping all they said is not true. I felt as if a heavy fog had veiled my mind. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. All I could see in my mind's eye was my cherished home and my beloved parents opening their arms to embrace me, as they had always done when I'd come home after a few days of absence. I had been sitting deep in thought for a while when I lifted my head and I noticed next to me an old man wearing glasses and holding a stick. He looked like an old wanderer. Although he was sitting, I could see he was a tall man, but he was emaciated. I glanced at him cautiously from the side. I didn't want him to notice my interest, but I soon realized that he saw nothing of his surrounding. I took a closer look at his face and said to him, "Excuse me, are you Mihaly Berend?" He turned to me and said, "My dearest Olga, it's you?" I hugged him tightly. This was my father's youngest brother, Mihaly. He was skin and bones. He was only 45 years old, but he looked more like 70. He had been a tall, good-looking man, a few centimeters taller than my father. He was still smiling and talking very softly, as if he found it difficult to speak. He asked me if I had any news of my parents and siblings. "I know nothing," I said. "I just arrived back from hell." He had been imprisoned in the Mauthausen concentration camp, he told me. People were dropping like flies there. He got sick with fleck typhus after liberation and came back from this living hell weighing only 80 pounds. I asked if anyone from his family had survived. He said his wife Elvira and his mother-in-law had survived in the ghetto in Pest. His son Ivan had been drafted into the Levante organization and taken to Germany, but he came back. His other son, Ervin, a sculptor already at the age of 16, had been drafted into forced labor. He was beaten to death and buried in a mass grave in Djur. He was hoping to get some help to bring his son back to be buried in Pest. "How did you recognize me?" he asked. I didn't want to tell him that at first I had thought he was an old man. He was no longer the smiling Uncle Mihaly I had been so fond of as a child, but he was still my dear, beloved uncle. He asked me where I was thinking of settling down. "I am going home," I said, "to see who had survived. I have no plans until I know who came back. I am hoping everyone, but I have no news yet." "Olga, come stay with us for a day." "Thank you very much for the kind offer," I answered, "but I need to go home first. I will go to Debrecen to see my sister Ilush and see what she knows. We hugged each other and said goodbye.
It's sad to be able to go back to Hungary and there's nobody there. They're all gone. The last time I was there, my uncle Mihaly was still alive. I went with my mother in Hungary in 1970 and we went and visited him. Now, I have to tell you something about Uncle Mihaly and his wife, Elvira. I idolized these people. They were the true bohème. They knew all the artists. I mean, there's a picture of Elvira languishing in a painting done by some very famous Hungarian artist. She was half naked and things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the kind of people they were. And she was a terrible smoker. And she would be like this, and the cigarette ashes were dangling. And I would be carrying an ashtray after her. I was like 5 or 6. Tandaria, please, your ashes, your ashes. I loved her. I felt freedom being with them.
So I take it they weren't religious.
Oh God, no.
Which is why you felt freedom.
There was no religion. There was nothing except beauty and art.
I noticed a fellow prisoner from my camp among the throng of men and women. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw her in the offices of the Joint in Pest. When we marched out of the concentration camp at 9 in the evening on April 19th, accompanied by some of the German personnel, she couldn't come with us because she was sick. The Germans locked 39 women in a room and were planning to set it on fire to cover their traces. She said that they had cried hard thinking what would become of us. Around midnight, only a few hours after we had left, the Russians arrived with the 2 girls who had escaped during the air raid. They told the Russians to hang the German commander on the gate of the camp and shoot the others. I can imagine what satisfaction they must have felt. The 39 girls would have died a horrible death in the flames had these 2 brave girls not intervened. When she finished her story, I said goodbye to her and went to find Magda. I told Magda that I'd found my father's brother, Mihaly, and ran into a girl from the concentration camp and told her how they had survived. She was sorry to have missed it all, but she also met some people she knew. We fell silent, full of uncertainties, thinking of what was waiting for us at home. I got 1,500 pengos from the Joint. We went back to the train station and took the train. At Pushpukladini train station, I said goodbye to Magda, who was going home to see who had come back. At the station, I saw a lorry, and standing next to it, my aunt's husband, Imre. We were happy to see each other alive, and I asked who had come back from his family. No one, he said. I told him the only one who had returned from my family was my Aunt Blanca, her husband, and their children. Why did I come back? I asked myself again and again. I have nothing and nobody to live for. My uncle Imre said he was leaving for Debrecen in half an hour, so I decided to go with him, but I felt totally downcast. He told me that none of his siblings had come back either, and his brother-in-law, a bank manager, had committed suicide before the Nazis could take him. His 2 children, a beautiful 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy, had been deported with his wife. Of my mother's 5 sisters and 3 brothers, only Aunt Blanca came back so far. Imre was talking the whole way to Debrecen, and I was very grateful for this because I didn't have to think. We arrived late at night. Imre said he had an acquaintance, a lovely woman with a nice clean home. I said it was too late and I didn't want to inconvenience someone I had never met before. She welcomed us warmly, and I was grateful for the coffee and the biscuits she offered us. I asked if I could take a bath, and she said of course. It was wonderful to stretch out in warm water in a long bathtub after the long journey. By the time I got up the next morning, she had laid table with some delicious baked goods. I hugged her and told her how grateful I was. Walking down the familiar streets, I ran into a fellow prisoner from the camp who had been deported with her daughter. I asked if her husband had survived, and she replied in the negative. She said they were moving to America where they had relatives. I inquired who came back from Budapest. Very few people, unfortunately, she replied. Did Aron Fisch return? Yes. Please tell him that Olga Berkovits survived. We said goodbye, and I wished her good luck. Imre took me to Chapo Street and showed me the shop where my brother-in-law, Ilus's husband, Erne, was working. When he saw me, he ran to me crying. Where are Ilus and Erika? I asked him. He couldn't utter a word. He was just weeping. I felt as if the walls were closing in on me. For over a year, I had been hoping to find them. I was standing there frozen, unable to even weep. Someone took hold of my hand. I looked up and saw an old man, but his voice sounded familiar. I realized it was Aunt Blanca's husband, Jenner. I couldn't embrace him. I felt an icy hand around my heart. The poor man sat me down, hugged me, and cried because he knew what I was going through. I had the answers. I didn't even need to ask the questions. It was painful to be alive when they were not. I said I was going to see Blanca to ask her why Ilush wasn't with her. Had she been taken with the group that went to Austria, she would have survived. But she was waiting for my message. When I saw her that fateful Friday in the ghetto, I promised her I would send her word if I learned what would be happening to us. But I couldn't because the German officer didn't let me go to her. Words can't express how I felt, and this guilt will stay with me to the end of my days. I went to see Aunt Blanca. At that time, I didn't know that she was the only one of the 8 siblings on my mother's side who survived. The loathsome Nazis had murdered all the others with their entire families. We embraced one another and cried. We sat down, and Aunt Blanca told me sobbing what had happened just before their deportation. When they were told to get ready, Ilush said she wasn't going. She was waiting for my message. I am devastated, I said to Blanca, and I have no one to talk to but you. I know you have your own problems, but you have your husband, Jenner, and it's easier to bear everything when you are not alone. I survived the camps because I kept hoping that I would come home and see my family. I came home to a rude awakening. I was happy to see her, but she understood that I couldn't talk. I just wanted to be alone for a few hours. Aunt Blanca's husband came home a little later with their 2 children. 14-year-old Latsi and 11-year-old Jutka had been deported to Austria with Blanca. Blanca and Latsi were forced to work. Jutka was too young.
The story of my grandmother and her sister, and the guilt she carried, was a massive topic of conversation when I was in Israel. Jutka explained to me that she was little. She remembers being put onto the train. It was like being put into a cage. And they were told they were being taken to Auschwitz. But for some reason, for 3 days, the train kept going back and forth. It turns out that Jutka, her brother, and her mother, Blanca, were on the Kastner train, which was a rescue operation and saved 1,600 Jews from Hungary. It consisted of 35 cattle wagons that left Budapest on the 30th of June, 1944. The train was named after Rudolf Kastner. He was a Hungarian Jewish lawyer and journalist, and he managed to negotiate with Eichmann to allow these 1,600 Jews to escape in exchange for gold, diamonds, and cash. The train was supposed to go to Auschwitz, but this happened to be a very lucky train. Its passengers were chosen from a wide range of social classes and included around 273 children. I wonder if my grandmother even knew about this special train, because this was something that Jutka found out years later when she went to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. When I sat there with Jutka and Magda, I got very upset because I thought that my grandmother should have done this. It would have been so good for her to sit with them and talk to them. Perhaps she wouldn't have had such a heavy heart towards the end of her life. That people could have appeased her guilt and explained to her that what happened was not her fault, that she was not responsible. I think that's what's so hard about all of this. I felt like I was speaking for her. I was her voice. But she never had the chance to be relieved of the guilt. And talking to Jutka and Magda, they were just so shocked by it all, to hear how Olga had felt all those years. But I think it was a generation that just swept everything under the carpet and moved on, or at least tried to, and just buried everything deep within them.
My brother-in-law Erno came to see me and asked me to come live with him and his niece. He lived in a small but nicely furnished modern apartment. I was thinking I would go and live with my uncle Mihaly in Budapest later on, but right then I had no choice but to move in with Erno, as Aunt Blanca's apartment was too small for 5 people. I was still hoping that my sister Nelly would return. I thought it unlikely that someone would come home 5 months after liberation, but I kept this thought to myself. Erno's niece was delighted to have me there, and I felt less lonely with them. She took me to her room and opened the wardrobe to show me all the clothes Erno had bought for his wife, my sister. I stood in front of the open doors of the wardrobe, unable to cry or speak. The following morning, Erno brought some delicious baked goods. I laid the table and made a good coffee. After breakfast, Erno and his niece left for work. I was alone for the first time in 13 months. I felt terrible. Until then, I hadn't thought about where to start my new life, if you could call it a life. Olga, you are still weak, I said to myself. You are not ready to think. You have to get used to freedom first. Sunday morning, Aron Fisch came for a visit. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. I was delighted to see him. I don't know why, and I kissed him. It occurred to me that we'd never kissed. Well, I couldn't really call this kissing either. He was just standing there stunned, all the more so because Erno was there too. I was happy to see someone from my past, someone my dear Ilush had liked. He was a good friend of Erno's, and he liked my sister a lot. He appreciated her intelligence and cleverness, and thought they had a wonderful home. I offered him a coffee, and he took out some delicious pastries and a loaf of bread he brought from Debrecen. He was friendly with the baker there and could easily get bread, while we had to stand in line to buy some. He always brought bread for us and for Aunt Blanca. Aron was in the textile trade. He owned a shop with 2 partners in Debrecen, and he came to Debrecen twice a week to buy merchandise from the wholesalers. After several weeks of Aron visiting me, he said, "You know, I am not as well off as Erno," but I didn't let him finish the sentence. I said I didn't care if Erno had a house full of diamonds. Nothing would change my feelings toward him. He was my dear sister Ilush's husband, and I would never marry him. I had said as much to Erno more than 2 weeks previously. "Why didn't you tell me?" asked Aron. "Why would I have told you?" I answered. "Because I thought you loved Erno, and this is why I never said anything to you." "Yes, I was fond of him when the family was still together before the war. My sister didn't come back, and I am forced to live with him, but I don't owe him anything." "I didn't ask you before, but would you come with me to my relatives tomorrow?" Aron said. "They have asked many times why I don't introduce you to them."
You know something about Philip Erno, her sister's
Husband.
man.
Yes.
He lived in Debrecen, but Erno, he wanted to take Olga because Olga, she was nice and she cooked them. She said, "I am going in Aron because I like Aron," and she wanted to escape from Erno.
On Sunday, Aron and I went to see his relatives. They welcomed me kindly and seated me at a beautifully laid table. We had coffee, all kinds of exotic fruits and delicious pastries, and talked for a long time. After thanking them for the nice welcome, I stood up to leave, but one of Aron's uncles took my hand. "Olga, I am the oldest uncle, and I would like to ask for your hand in marriage on behalf of my nephew. He told us he would like to marry you." When Aron asked me to come and meet you, I said yes, but if he wants me to marry him, I would like him to ask me. They all agreed. So Aron asked me to marry him. They broke the plate, and he finally kissed me on the lips. Everybody hugged me, and we drank some delicious liquor. It was all very pleasant. Aron put his mother's beautiful ring on my finger. They knew how I must have been feeling not having any of my family around. I held back my tears. I would cry when I am alone, I thought. Aron took me home, and I told Erno the good news. He congratulated me and kissed Aron. The following morning, I went to see Blanca. She was very pleased when I told her that Aron and I had been engaged and showed her the ring he had given me.
But did Gamama ever tell you why she never got married earlier?
There was a man who was courting her. He was very nice, he was a doctor, and she was not in love with him. He was in love with her. I think she really liked my father. She had met him at her sister's wedding.
Oh, is that how they met?
Yeah.
So he was friends with her sister's husband?
Yeah.
The high holidays were approaching. This was a terrible period for me. I had hoped we would all be together this year, and all my hopes were dashed. A few days later, I got word from Nelly, who had learnt from the Red Cross that I had survived. She was coming to Debrecen to spend a few days with me. Can you imagine how I felt? We had not seen each other for more than 2 years. We had been very close growing up, and I couldn't wait to see her again. She came from Pest and stayed with Aunt Blanca. She looked radiant. You couldn't tell that she had been seriously ill after liberation. She was liberated by the Americans. "Why did it take you so long to come home?" I asked. "I know you were ill, but I was going mad here because no one came back from our family. I was hoping every day that my family would be back home by the time I arrive." "How could you be so naive, Olgica?" she replied. "You had always been the clever one." "Because I didn't want to hear any bad news." Nellie and I spent about 10 days together. I told her about Aron and that we would soon get married. She was very pleased. She knew Aron because her first husband was also from Debrecen. When Aron came to see me, they were glad to meet again. He said he remembered seeing her going to the synagogue with her mother-in-law and how beautiful and elegant she looked in her large black hat.
We're walking through the streets of Debrecen, and my mom's reminiscing about growing up in this small town near Debrecen. And this is also where my grandfather and his family were from. And we suddenly come across the synagogue, which my mother immediately recognizes.
Here is the synagogue. Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Csak kívülről van rendben.
She says it's only nice on the outside. There's nobody left, eh? There's no Jews left. None. Semmi zsidó nincsen. No.
But there's still a synagogue. How come?
Because it's a museum. I gotta go in because that's going to give me this I remember.
Yes?
Oh yes. Wow. That was a women's entrance. That was a men's entrance.
Oh, you remember?
Oh yes.
Oh my God, that's
We were here a lot.
Wow.
We were here every holiday, right? And this was huge. This
Yes.
house wasn't here. This wasn't here. It was a big, big yard. Wow. She says the pigeons live here now.
Oh, what a shame. Whoa.
Wow.
Such an amazing space.
And they want to put a bima so that when people come from out of town like us, they can do a prayer. Oh, this is what I remember. Look, Michelle. Wow. Wow.
This is exactly the same, I think.
It's exactly the same. I imagine my great-grandmother came here too.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It was the only synagogue in town.
Well, around the whole area.
Yes. Your whole family would have come here.
This was so fantastic. The temple was very interesting to go in there.
That was beautiful.
You can imagine how beautiful it was
Yeah.
before. But I never liked those.
Oh, between the women and the men. You can't even see anything. Like, how ridiculous.
I don't know, it was awful. I was so angry at my mother. I said, why do you want to go to a synagogue like that?
Yeah, I don't think she had a choice of which synagogue she could go to.
No, it was amazing.
If she knew about a Reform synagogue,
she didn't like the Reform synagogue.
oh, she didn't like it.
Yeah, but she took me to a really nice synagogue where we're sitting beside each other. As the temple.
It's because she wants exactly what she had when she was growing up.
Aron decided that we should get married on November 25th, 1945. He asked me to go to Debrecen and gave me money to buy ducks for the wedding and have them slaughtered there. I went 4 times, bought the ducks, cooked them, and made cracklings, and I put everything, cracklings, meat, liver, and duck fat in jars. I went to see the Grunfeld sisters and ordered 2 winter coats from them, a black and a brown one. I paid them in flour, 20 kilos for each coat. I took the flour on a bike from Debrecen. I had almost no clothes, so I made a pretty brown dress, an elegant black one, a few skirts, a nice dressing gown, and some underwear. I also went to Hadhaz to visit my paternal grandfather, Gabor Fried's, grave. I tried to find the tombstones of other relatives as well, but I couldn't. Still, I had a good cry.
In Haidu Hadhaz, my mother and I visited the cemetery, the only site left of the Jewish people of the town.
What a beautiful cemetery, eh? His name was Fried Gabor. So he died around 1930, in the 30s, almost 100 years old, so.
Some of them are completely
No.
weathered.
Wow. Wow, it's going to be impossible.
It's very hard to tell.
I'll put a stone on them.
On my way back from the cemetery, I saw Auntie Steinberg standing in front of her house. She taught Nellie and me to read and write in Hebrew. I went over to Auntie Steinberg and said that I was glad to see they had all survived. Large families and other fortunate people had been deported to Austria, where only the sick died. She invited me in. When I entered the room, I almost fainted. I saw my own furniture that had been manufactured in my father's workshop. "Are you unwell?" they asked. "How did my furniture end up in your house?" I inquired. "It's not yours, it's my daughter's," she said. I opened the door of the wardrobe, and there was my name. They just looked at each other, and I said I would send a carriage to take my furniture to my fiancé in Debrecen. I walked over to my grandmother's house, but it was gone. I knew Bertie Krause was responsible for this. He was an uncle by marriage only and had no ties to my family. So I went to see him and asked what had happened to grandmother's home. "Your uncle Mihaly said I could do whatever I wanted with it," he said. "And you went and sold it to her neighbor who had always wanted that plot? My grandmother would never have sold it to them." I guess the same had happened to our house. He sold that too. Did he not even fear God? When I went into his living room, I saw two of my father's plainer benches, his valuable tools with his name engraved in them, and armchair frames hanging from the ceiling. I wished the ground would open up beneath his feet and swallow him. I said to him, "Uncle Bertie, you are a grave robber. You are happy that my family didn't come back." He just looked at me, a phony smile on his face. He sent me 4 round chairs to Debrecen. If I think about what he had done to me, and I still forgave him, but I can't live with hatred in my heart. At night, I had terrible nightmares. I led a double life. I tried to banish all the bad thoughts in the daytime and remember my childhood, my parents, and all the love they'd given me. I tried to sing the military songs my father had brought back from the First World War and taught me as a little girl. I was unwell when I was alone, especially at night when Aron went to shul. We had a tile stove and the flames projected various shapes on the wall of the dark room. One night, I was standing in front of the stove and I fainted and my nightgown caught fire. I was unconscious when Aron arrived home. When I came to, I told him what must have happened. He was used to going to shul morning and night, and he didn't know what to do with me while he was gone. A few days later, he asked a friend of his to look after me when he went to synagogue. I knew the man from Auschwitz, so he invited me over in the evenings until I managed to get rid of my fears bit by bit. I didn't want to make our life more difficult. I was used to being independent from a young age, and I didn't want to burden Aron with my clinginess. However, there were times when I felt I could never get rid of my fears completely. I was very depressed during the winter and only started to feel better and more like myself with the arrival of spring. We never told anyone that I'd had a hard time coping with winter. I liked working in our shop. It was fun, and I quickly learnt the trade. I had been used to helping my father in the workshop, and it didn't really matter that it was a different trade. The shop, which had 3 large windows with shutters, was on the main street of Debrecen. Business was booming after the war. People were hungry for nice clothes. It was difficult to buy good merchandise. Inflation was skyrocketing, and the value of money plummeted from one hour to the next. Aron bought corn and wheat, sold it for dollars, and I took the dollars to Budapest to buy textile goods. It had never occurred to me that I could be prosecuted for this.
I thought they had the business till the day they left.
Oh, no, 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 no. The Russians took them away, I think 51, 52.
So how did they live?
My mother used to go and buy silk scarf and paint it, go into Debrecen and sell it. She was a wonderful artist. She also rented a machine, a knitting machine in the kitchen. She knitted things and cut them out, made sweaters. She was brilliant. She was ingenious. I mean, just for making dominoes from nothing. She was very smart.
Very creative.
Oh.
One day, Aron brought a very nice pure silk from Debrecen. When I saw it, I said I wanted a dress from it. He said I could have two if I wanted, but he didn't guarantee the material. There had been a fire in the front of the large shop where the textile came from, and Aron didn't know whether the smoke had damaged the material or not. I cut enough material for 2 dresses and washed it. The silk was fine, so I put it in the shop window. Within 2 days, all the silk was gone. We told every single customer that it could have suffered smoke damage, but no one cared. It was too beautiful. I made a very elegant dress for myself and gave the rest of the material to Auntie Blanca. Aron was happy that I worked in the shop because I was very good with customers. They always asked for advice about what to make from the materials they bought. I was slowly regaining my old self, but my nights were still terrible. My poor dear Aron didn't have one good night's sleep because of my nightmares. It wouldn't have helped if I slept in another room, and he didn't let me anyway. He kept telling me that everything would be fine eventually. All I needed was more time and rest. There was an economic boom after the war, followed by a recession. People dreamed of an easier life, but their financial circumstances didn't follow their dreams. Our parents' guidance would have helped us so much, but alas, they were not with us anymore. But our love for one another and the fact that we could discuss absolutely everything with each other helped us overcome all our difficulties. Slowly but surely, we figured things out. We just had to ensure that we made both ends meet. But as we were raised with similar values, we understood each other well. Aron learned the textile trade before the war. He was an apprentice for 4 years, then he became an assistant, and he opened his first business with his parents' help at the age of 18. He was very diligent, incredibly honest and trustworthy, and he soon had an extensive clientele. When he was drafted into forced labor 12 years later in 1942, he left the business in his mother's care. We first met in the summer of 1942 at Ilus and Erna's house. Aron and Erna were close friends. Aron endured unimaginable hardships in forced labor. He had to carry heavy loads on his back in the terrible dust and survive on meager portions of food. His health deteriorated and he developed asthma, but he survived and returned from this hell. When he came back to Hungary at the beginning of 1945, he learned that his entire family had been wiped out in 1944. His 2 younger brothers, as well as his only sister's husband, were killed in forced labor. His parents, his sister, and her 3-year-old little daughter were gassed in Auschwitz, and so were many of his relatives. He turned inward and didn't talk to anyone. It was only much later that he opened up to me and spoke about what he had been through during the war. We were both orphans, but it was easier to bear it together. We had no one else. We lived for each other only, and within a very short time, our love for one another blossomed. And it wasn't only love, but a deep friendship that bonded us together. I talked a lot about my beloved parents, my home, and all the love and attention I had known as a child and a young adult.
I could not understand. My dad was very silent. He was in pain. I did not understand his pain. Never said a word about his family. And I said, "Can you tell me about your mother?" Nothing to tell. "Can you tell me about your dad?" Nothing to tell. The only thing I remember about my father when I was little, he had a bicycle. He loved his bicycle. He didn't have cars. And I would sit in the front and holding me. And that was, to me, that was a way of having a hug. I wasn't a hug person, so I remember that as of being hugged.
What I remember about my grandfather is that he was a quiet man, kept very much to himself. As you heard, he never spoke to either of us about his past, his family, the war, but I never thought to ask. I was 14 when he passed away. He may not have shown affection like most parents, but he always kissed me on the forehead at bedtime, and when I cried, he held me. I remember walking with him to synagogue and holding his hand. I knew he loved me very much. He worried about me and cared for me, and he took me everywhere I needed to go. As a child, he would accompany me to school, pick me up, and also take me to my after-school activities, watching me do ballet or piano lessons. He would sit there patiently waiting for me.
We had to go to Debrecen every week to buy textiles for our shop from the wholesalers. We also went every Sunday morning to visit Auntie Blanca and her family, whom Aron grew fond of too. We got together with some couples to play cards, usually in the home of a second cousin. We always took some delicious pastry or a baked turkey when we visited family in Debrecen. They never came to Budapest. There was nothing to do there, whereas Debrecen was a big city that offered various kinds of entertainment. We often went to the cinema and the theater. In the summer, we hiked in the woods or went to the beach. We always had a great time. Auntie Blanca had a youthful spirit, and she and her husband always came along with us. The women played rummy, the men tarot. It was sometimes hard to concentrate in the dense cigarette smoke amid heated discussions, but I didn't mind. We always had a great time. We never fought, and we looked forward to the next Sunday when we would meet again. These visits meant a great deal to me. I could relax and escape my dark thoughts for at least a day, and Aron had a good time too. Going home, we felt elated, as if we had just found each other. I felt this was how my parents had loved one another, and I kept reminding myself that we could be like them. I had to accept the way things were. I couldn't change the past.
In Debrecen, we meet with Sylvie, who works at City Hall. She had taken us to the synagogue, and then we walked to the Holocaust Memorial statue just near the center of town. Before traveling to Hungary, we didn't even know this memorial even existed.
Oh, this is the memorial.
Fischers, here it is.
Fisch.
Here it is. Yes, it is. Fisch, Danish, Jenner, Samuel. So we found it. Here, this is Fisch Samuel. That's my grandmother.
That's amazing.
That's my grandfather and the two brothers. I can't believe it's there.
I know, that's so wonderful.
Köszönöm. Oh, köszönöm szépen.
Örülök, hogy örömet tudok.
Oh, I'm so happy. It was worth to come.
Good.
It's eternal. It's forever. Mindy necklace. That is worth it.
Good. I'm so glad. See?
When she said she can't find it, I was devastated.
I know.
Oh, my mother would be so happy.